Everybody, Will here with this week's interview chair brought to you by Canadian Chronicle TV and Pro Plan. You have to watch this interview. This Gina Weiss, it blew my mind. So make sure you watch it, okay? Sit down, relax, listen to Gina for the next hour plus because I couldn't stop. I had to keep going. So sit back and relax and take notes. Hi, everybody. Will here with this week's interview chair brought to you by Canine Chronicle TV and Pro Plan. This week on the chair, we have retired professional handler, retired AKC field rep, and now AKC judge, Gina Wieser. How are you, Gina?
I'm doing well. How are you, Will?
I'm great. It's good to see you. You look fabulous. I watched you judge, though, so I saw you not too long ago. I watched
Oh
you
my
online.
goodness.
So,
Oh my goodness. Isn't that a great tool? I mean,
oh,
that whole thing of being able to
it's
watch it.
wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
When I was in the hospital, I couldn't get to any shows because I was in the hospital. But I would watch AKC TV and watch all these shows. It saved me. It kept me going. All these shows to watch. So
I just did my critiques and I just turned on AKC TV and I watched it and I listened to my recordings and I looked at my notes and I was like, this is fantastic. It makes
that's a
it
great
very
idea.
simple.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's right. Because a week later I forget so much. I'm thinking that's a good idea. Oh. All right. Well, okay. The first question is, tell us, everybody here, how you got started in our sport.
Well, my mom loved dogs and forever. She was just a dog lover. So when I grew up, I remember as a little, my earliest memories are like probably 3, 4 years old. We had boxers and she loved boxers. So we always had a boxer in the house. And we lived on Long Island in a neighborhood. And we had the house with a couple boxers in it. And when the boxers passed, she did some research, and honestly, John Kennedy was the president at the time. And she went out and she bought a toy fox terrier and named it Jackie after Jackie Kennedy. So Jackie was around until she passed. And now we were probably, I guess I was about 6 or 5, and she would take us to Westminster because we lived on Long Island. So we just had to get on the train, go
Yeah.
to New York, and watch the dogs. At that point, Captain Haggerty was doing his obedience thing, and they'd have a big obedience performance and drill. And then they would do mock field trials and we would watch that and it was so exciting and fun. And then they did the groups and we would watch those, and that is my earliest memory of going to dog shows. And yeah, that was a long time ago. and and so then I requested a poodle for my 10th birthday. My dad was very ill and he passed right before my 10th birthday. And so mom was very much about doing something to pull me out of my funk because I was his only child and his little girl. And we were very close. And she gave me that poodle. And she was a white toy poodle from the pet store, I believe, in Macy's. Macy's had a pet store in
Didn't know
19,
that.
yes, in 1965. They had a pet shop in Macy's. And that's when I got the poodle. And of course, if you're going to have a poodle, now you have to learn how to groom the poodle and you have to learn how to take care of the poodle and blah, 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 blah. And I agreed to that. Well, my poodle grew up to look like a Bichon, actually. She was very long and very low and very thick boned, and she had little short legs on her. So, but she was my dog. And oddly enough, and when I went to work for AKC, I sent them a copy of my registration, which she was registered in my name, to them. And Daryl Hayes said to me, he goes, "Are you kidding? You still have that registration?" I'm like, "Hey, I don't know. Mom had it. She gave it to me. I think it's kind of cool,
It
So,
is.
yeah. So I have the registration of my first poodle. And my dad had passed, and mom knew somehow, and I guess maybe he groomed the dogs, was Bobby Clyde. And Bobby Clyde in the town we lived in had a grooming shop on Long Island.
Okay.
And I knew Bobby was from Long Island anyway. And for those that don't know Bobby Clyde, he's Todd Clyde's father. But Bobby Clyde would let me ride my bicycle down there, and he would teach me how to groom my poodle. And he would also teach me how to sweep the floor and vacuum up the hair and da 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 and hold a pair of clippers. And he taught me pretty much everything I needed to know to keep her sort of groomed and cut
That's
toenails
a
and do
great
those
story in
things.
itself, the Bobby Clyde story. That's great.
I know. And to follow that up, Bobby would show up at PCA just to come and see me and what dogs I was showing. And it was so cool. Once he moved to Delaware and we were in Maryland, he would come over and watch, and he'd say, "Oh, I came just to watch you, Gina, and see you and remember when and blah, blah, blah." And it was so sweet. Yeah, it was
Oh,
so sweet.
that's amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, that's how poodles came about. And of course, if you have a female poodle, you gotta breed it, when you're starting out. Oh my goodness, even if she is that long and that short legged. And so that's where we went. My dearest friend in the world, I met when I was 11 years old. And this is after we had gone ahead and bought something better through Bobby's advice, actually, and another poodle. And we went up to breed it, and it was owned by a fellow named Mel Davis. And it was the one that Annie showed at Westminster years ago and went best in show, Wilbur White Swan's son. And so we went up to Connecticut because this dog was boarded up in Connecticut at a Yorkie kennel, Galen Yorkies. Barbara Welch was her name, that actually originated Galen Yorkies. And when we got there to breed this bitch to this little dog, they had a daughter who was like a year older than me. And she and I became friends like that fast. We ended up moving to Connecticut through their referral of their real estate agent and getting property so we could actually have dogs and breed dogs and get off of Long Island. And she flew in and went to PCA with me this year. And it was the cool, like I said, we've stayed very, very good friends, but it was just the coolest thing that we took a full circle around, and she was like, she knew how special it was for me. And yeah, it was great. So I love my friend Sloan. She's the best. She's the best.
Oh, that's exciting. That makes it even more memorable. Oh, wow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I probably skipped a lot of years in there, but anyway.
Yeah, we're not
Um,
done yet. Don't worry. We'll go back.
Yeah, so who knew, you get to college, and I went to shows. Didn't go to a lot of shows because I was always very active in sports and things at home. And I also, once the kennel was built, it seemed as though I ended up the one that was in charge of the kennel by the time I was a teenager. I was in charge of demanding matted poodle that we had to show. We ended up with 3 apricot standard poodles, and they were litter mates. And we bought them from an old collie, right? Right. Your face. I see your face.
Tried not to make
Yeah.
a face.
Yeah. It was a cringe, believe me. And I remember them well. Rusty, Red, and Flame. And somehow Mom got connected with Wendell. No, I take that back. We got connected to Bob Forsyth, who at the time was not married to Janie, and he was in New York, Chappaquiddick, New York. I don't know. Anyway, he
He
was
was from
up that way.
Chappaquiddick?
I believe so.
Wow.
I believe so. And that's where he had his kennel. So we took Rusty, the male, who was in coat first, to him, and he finished him, actually. And then when we went to Canada, Terry Childs would show him up there, who was from Carnaby Yorkies, who was in the neighborhood. He was one of the dog people in the neighborhood, and another person that I can absolutely credit for helping me learn grooming, because I worked in his grooming shop as a teenager. And Bob finished that dog, had him x-rayed. He was dysplastic. Done. He was done. So, okay, that's the first wad of money down the hole. and then the red bitch was the apricot bitch was very beautiful. And she ended up, I guess he might have pawned us off to Wendell. And Wendell showed her and finished her very quickly and did very well with her at PCA under a judge named Francis Angela, who happened to be an apricot standard poodle breeder. So, yeah. And then the last one was not a bitch to take to a dog show. Her temperament was terrible. So those are the dogs I ended up showing in juniors, which if you've ever witnessed a kid with an apricot standard poodle in juniors, it was like they were flying over your head and, getting between your legs and the whole thing. And at that time, juniors were being judged by handlers. It was after they were done with all their work of the day. Juniors went in the ring, and we all went. And Maribeth,
that's how it's still done up here.
Yeah, and Maribeth and I go down this lane often because she was in my neighborhood, or I was in hers, and we showed against each other. And yeah, we laugh about it all the time. Actually, yeah. She had her easy little Manchester Terrier, and I had my crazy standard poodle puppies leaping over my head. But yeah.
Okay, so carry on.
Okay, so then came college, and after about a year and a half of college, and very much still seeped into that bigger than ever. Mom had come to a realization that the standards may not, after breeding, I guess she bred about 10, 12 standard champions. And then after that, it was like, okay, maybe we should dial down to toy size dogs. And Wendell went to England, and he bought for her. And by then, Mom was remarried, and my stepdad it was a surprise for her, 2 beautiful bitches. And one was from Brands Lake and one was from Sudbrook, were the kennel names on them. And it was an apricot toy bitch and a white toy bitch. And that white toy bitch went on in the first breeding, and now we were being piloted by Wendell at that point, because everyone knew Wendell Salmon as Alakai, but Wendell also had a line of toys called Carnival. And that was a kennel name for his toys. And a gal named Martha Gleason worked for him, and she was very much into the toys. And George Brito and Bill, and I can't think of Bill's last name. But anyway, we went to Wendell, and Wendell brought back these bitches, and that little white bitch produced are in her first breeding, our first three champions, which were best bred by in show, winner's dog. I think the bitch was like reserve winner's bitch, all at PCA. And Wendell, because they owned them together, showed them in bred by. And so that was our first real walk into the toy poodle world. And
Good first step.
it was a really good first step, and he was amazing. And after that, there were many seats around the dining table at our house because we had this huge old colonial house that had like 7 bedrooms in it. And so when the handlers were in the area, they were at our house and they were staying with us, camping out and using the kennel and blah, 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 blah. And it was like, the education that you get when you're sitting around a table with people like Wendell Samet and Peter Federico and Martha Jane Ablett and just all these very acclaimed dog breeders, and they were real dog breeders. They had a lot of dogs and really did their thing. It was just amazing. And I remember Wendell telling me something as an adult when I was doing judges education at Poodle Club of America. He said to me, "Oh, you were listening all those years." I was like, I'm honored to have you say that to me and yes, I was listening. And so, yeah. So that's it.
That's
I mean, that's
amazing.
all she wrote. And I honestly, I quit college and I said, I want to show dogs. And so I went about, and I think I know at 21, I applied for my license. And I also had a child when I was 21 because I married when I was 19. And then by 21, we had our first child, or I had my first child. And so I needed to support him and make money, and for the family. And I applied at AKC for my handler's license, and they granted me a limited handler's license for poodles. And I'd bred a couple litters of dachshunds with Bobby Fowler and Jane, or no, it wasn't Jane at the time. It was Pat Beresford and Bobby Fowler, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a name back. Yeah. And I used to go over there and take care of the dogs for them and babysit Charles. So there you go. While they went off to shows. Yeah. Yeah. So
That's
anyway, so then I started just showing pretty much full time. And of course, there were laps in there. I did go through a divorce, and that then I had to stay home and do about a job at home, something that I could do there. And I kept grooming and kept working, and then boom, here we go. Met the guy that I will be celebrating my 43rd anniversary with in a few days. And
Congratulations.
he's been my biggest cheerleader. He's been my biggest cheerleader. Whatever I thought was the right thing to do it, and we'll figure it out. And couldn't get any better than that. And that's my sweetheart, Cliff. And he had his own business. He was appointed to the Naval Academy and had a full scholarship to go to school. He went to school in very similar ways. He went, and his father was a chief petty officer, but actually was an amazing furniture builder and woodworker. And he worked with him growing up. And he was the oldest of 6 kids. And he decided a couple of years into the University of Maryland pre-med that he really just wanted to work with his hands with wood. And he quit school and went and did the same thing. And now we both reflect on the fact that we did that. At times, yeah, maybe we think, oh, what would it have been like? And then we say, well, of course, we wouldn't have met. And of course, we wouldn't have done as hard as it was at times. We wouldn't have done what we love to do all of our lives. And I can't thank my mother enough for pointing me in a direction other than, and he can't thank his parents enough for the same, because they kind of gave us something that, they knew that we loved to do, and we just kept on doing it. Kept on
It's
doing it.
amazing. So many people don't get that opportunity, and we
No,
do it on
exactly.
sport, you know.
Exactly.
You gave me goosebumps, Gina. Stop
Well,
it.
it means so much to me, it means so much to me. And that brings me around to the full circle of this judging at PCA. It's like, holy cow, oh my gosh, the anxiety levels were incredible prior to getting there. And I was like, oh my gosh, just to think that you're standing in that place where you've been to many times, but certainly not in that capacity. And you looked at these people like they were just sitting on a throne above you, and thinking, oh my God, I can't believe that I'm actually standing in this spot doing this. It really is. It's so, it's cool. It's really cool.
It is really cool. I get it. You think about all the ones that came before us, and it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, it is. It is. And it kind of I can remember Annie Clark, she'd be, hey kid, bring that dog up here. And I'd be like, "Oh, okay." And she and Jim always did some kind of like a breeder education thing. And it was prior to the days of PCA competition. And I can remember being so excited about attending that more than actually the dog show. And, I
Yeah.
mean, I was like, it was so exciting to go there and learn something from them. It was so cool. She started a group. I moved to Maryland, and when I was in the thick of handling, it was actually during my divorce.
So
Mom had,
just to give a timeline, what a year was this? Just
I think it was right around 71, because around 75. No, it was in 75. So I moved to Maryland, and mom and my stepdad had bought a big kennel there, and a big boarding kennel. And that she asked me, she said, you interested in coming and running the kennel, And I'm like, okay. And because we had two separate buildings. We had a show building, and then we had the boarding kennel. And it was like a 75 dog kennel. It was a big kennel. And so I went down there and worked out of the kennel. And at the time, she was hooked up with Lou Grello, showing dogs. Yeah. Yeah. And Lou was showing white toy poodles for her and with her. And they did some breedings together. And he had some really nice ones, actually. And, but anyway, and I was professional handling at the time as well, because at that point I was licensed, and could do it. And it was quite an experience. But anyway, Jim and Annie lived not far from us. They were about, Mrs. Keene at Round Table was just across the border, and Jordan Chamberlain was there managing for her. And he was a kid, basically. Jordan and I were about the same age, and we were both pretty much kids. We were in our 20s, early 20s, um, and so that we had Mrs. Keene close by. We had Mrs. Ware was close by with her Whippet estate. We had Jim and Annie were close by. I mean, there were a lot of people right in that area, which now Mike and Michelle are down in that area, and Rita and Dougie had been down in that area. They've all lived in that same area where we lived at one time. So Annie started this group. It was called Annie and Jim, the Dover Poodle Group. And the Dover Poodle Group, we met once a month, and we had quite a following after a short time, because of who it was and because of the things that you learned. And I remember the last time they changed the breed standard for poodles, it had, Annie would take our group together, and we picked apart the standard piece by piece by piece by piece. or different things. And I know one of the changes was almond eye changed to oval eye. And there were just like small changes that took place, but it was all circled around this group that would meet. Well, the next thing you know, hey, next meeting is going to be at the firehouse in blah, blah, blah. And we're doing, Rachel Page Elliott is coming to do a program for us. And here she is. And this drew like 200 people. All of a sudden, like all these people from all these clubs came together to see Rachel Page Elliott do her dog steps, which was, the happening new thing at the time.
Yeah.
And
That's
and it
amazing.
was
You got that turnout before social media because at
it was
200
right.
people,
Right,
yeah.
exactly. It was crazy.
Wow.
This firehouse was filled, and we, as the Dover Poodle Group, sponsored it. And
I'm
Frank
making
would
notes while
come.
you're talking, so don't mind me.
Joan Scott of Wisfire Poodles. She lived nearby too, and we'd have a meeting at her place. And who shows up? But Frank, Sabella, and some. I think Ed Bibbin showed up at one time too. And just to have this meeting and talk about poodles and talk about dogs, and of course with Jim and Annie commentating, it was always fabulous. And we'd have the meeting around the pool, and we'd go to Mrs. Keene's, and she would grab myself and Jordan and say, "All right, you kids are going to be doing the grooming, and I'm going to be doing the talking. Not a problem. Yes, ma'am. We will do that." And here we are showing people how to do English saddles and continentals. And we've got our scissors out. And we're going, now take more off here and do this. And do you understand why? And blah, blah, blah. It was that experience of going to those poodle group meetings was priceless. Was
Oh, I can't
priceless.
imagine. It's just
It,
it's you
we
awestruck me. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
we
No,
learned so much, and even handlers like Frank Wallenick and the Lou Grellos and the any of the handlers that would come to these meetings, because there was so much to be absorbed by these great meetings. We had Poodle
amazing.
Olympics. We'd go to Mrs. Ware's and they'd set up this thing, and one year Jordan and I judged them and somebody else, and then we had to talk about it. We had to talk about why we did that. And honestly, and she had a couple different Japanese kids that come in, and then Kaz came in, and he was there as a kid. Yeah.
Now, did the Dover Club become a club, or was it still just a meet like
No,
a?
she didn't believe, they did, her and Jim did not believe that dog people should form a club unless they were educated on the dogs they were going to form the club on. So
Amazing.
so we called it a group. And she created that group just to educate us enough to form a club. Well, we never formed a club, there was never a club formed. So, and Dover was for Dover, Delaware, because
Yeah.
we all sat right in that little hub of Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland area, northern
You think that could
Maryland.
happen nowadays?
That's funny you're saying that, because I have a friend here, and now I'm in the middle of the country. And thank you, American Kennel Club. And uh, and I have thought about that, because I have a friend that built a building, a huge building, that I go out and I give handling classes in on Wednesday nights, and they do obedience, they do rally, they do agility, they do all these functions out there. And this place is big enough to hold these kind of meetings, but it's way out in the country. And I'm like, will people come to something like that? Because it's such a cool thing to be able to do. Yeah, I think that would be an awesome thing for people. But I loved the theory that you shouldn't have a club until you're educated on the breeds that you want to have a club for. So, and I'm like,
Okay, that's incredible, Gina. Wow, you like it's wow. It's a lot to take in. That's incredible.
it is a lot. It is a lot. And I've had a great life in that. I mean, yeah, it's been hard and we've struggled and, both being self-employed like that, it's taken its ups and downs
Sure.
but we've had a great life. We moved to Florida in, I think it was around 79. I'd met my husband and we moved to Florida in 79 and I moved my whole dog handling business down there. Of course, mom was PO'd because I was deserting her. And but she got over it. She got over it. Yeah. And we kept breeding. We did breedings together and she introduced me into the little Chihuahua world, She said, I have these beautiful little chihuahuas. Do you want one? I like, no. And she's like, no, you have to have one. And so we went up for Christmas and she goes, you can take this one. I said, well, I like that one too. And she goes, oh, well, you can have, no. She goes, just wait. Maybe you can have her later. Okay. I'm like, so took mine home, made it a champion. And then suddenly I could have the other one. So I got the other one too and specialed her and did very well with her. But yeah, so she had this little intimate breeding program of Chihuahuas, which I co-bred with her. But yeah, down in Florida, I really pretty much put my nose to the ground and handled very much full time. Then the kids hit that age where you kind of had to be home with them. And so I stopped for a while. I did back off and I would go on occasional weekends, a couple weeks. Well, that's when dog shows were only on the weekends. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And so I would go, intermittently to the shows, a couple, every month or so. But the kids had a lot going on too, so I had to hang around for them. And yeah, and when you're self-employed, you tend to work beyond the time limits of work, So you can't, well, and especially in our world, right?
Yeah. There's no off time. Yeah,
No, there's no off time. By the time I left there, I was very much involved with showing dogs, and a couple hurricanes came in. Actually, a few, three to be exact, in a couple months, and
Wow.
the third one took the roof right off of my kennel, and above it was the apartment where the people that worked for me lived, and it was a total loss. And so now I had about a dozen, mostly toy dogs, living in my house. Yes. And so you can imagine, you can't even turn over in bed without, yeah. And living in my house the FEMA and the insurance and this and that. And it just became so overwhelmingly involved with trying. And I had several out of country clients that couldn't just take their dogs home. So I still had their dogs. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so frustrating. And the job came up. It had been a full year of dealing with this. And the job came up for the AKC rep. And Michael Save was the AKC rep down there at the time, who I became very close to. And actually, I think Frank was living down there at the time, and Sandra Goose Allen, Frank Zabella, Sandra Goose Allen, and we kind of, did social things together. And Michael said, "You should apply for that job. You'd be good at that job." Da, 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 da. I'm like, "Yeah, no, I don't think so." And then I went home and I said to my husband, I said, "There's a job opening." I said, "I don't know where the location is or anything, but there's a job opening for an AKC rep." He goes, "Well," and I said, "Well, I just feel like," and now, mind you, after going to dog shows for so many years, I'm not a church lady, but I just felt like there was something that was saying, it's time to make a change. It's time to change your direction here a little bit because this isn't going so good and you're not very happy at this point. And da 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 da. I was just started, and he was like, whatever you want to do, we are going to figure it out. I'm like, okay, I'm going to apply. So I did. I applied
What
for
year
the
was
job.
that?
2005. And it was right around Christmas. It was getting on to the end of the year. And I put it off. And then I went to a show, it might have been the AKC show, actually. And Michael said to me, he goes, did you put it in your resume? I'm like, no. He goes, well, do it. And I'm like, okay. So I went home. I did it. It was the end of the year because I was showing the toy poodle bitch. I won the variety with the toy poodle bitch, I think, or I don't know. Maybe I was showing the 12. I don't know. I don't remember. But anyway, but I went home and I did it. And I think it was like January 5th. The phone rings and it's Daryl Hayes. And now, mind you, I was so not used to applying for a job that I went and researched everything and had it all out for phone interviews, for this, for that. And I had everything laid out by the phone on the desk. And I was going to be totally prepared for when this phone call came. And the phone call came in and he asked me like 3 questions and he goes, and here's the deal. We need somebody in Nashville and Jimmy Mitchell's in Memphis but we're going to move it over to Nashville and da, da, da. And 3 questions. He goes, you go into the garden? I'm like, yes, sir, I am. And he said, well, you know what? He said, how about we interview there? And I'm like, oh, sure. Okay. And he goes, well, I'll be back in touch. Click. Done. I'm like, well, so much for all this paperwork I had next to it because none of that applied
But
to
if
what
you
he was
were
telling
prepared,
me. Right. I was prepared, though. Yes, I was very prepared. And so I got off the phone and I said to my husband, I said, I'm on the short list for this job. And he goes, okay. So next step, prepare for the interview in New York. So I had another pile of paper that I took with me to New York. And this friend of mine that I told you about, that we've been friends with I've been friends with for so many years. She would meet me in New York every year because she was still in Connecticut. She would meet me every year. So she was like, Gina, I think you're being a little neurotic. I'm like, stop, no. She goes, you need to calm down. Just need to calm down. And we're sitting on the bed in the New Yorker, and we always got a suite because her guardian, her mother had since passed, her guardian would always growing up, would always get us a suite. So we'd always be happy girls, and I had all those papers laid out because he was supposed to call on this particular day, and it's snowing like hell. I mean, it is snowing, like blizzard snowing outside, one of those years at Westminster. And the phone rings, and he's like, okay, so instead of you walking over now, because it wasn't a show day, instead of you walking over now, how about we do it on this day at the garden? What day are you showing? And we went through the schedule, blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, fine. And he goes, in the meantime, you going to Progressive? I said, yes, sir, I am. And he goes, okay, well, we'll probably see you there. So Sid Good is over there stalking me at the ring at Progressive. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what is going on here? And I showed my dog, won the variety actually, so that was good. And I came out of the ring and Sydney comes over and she goes, Daryl Hayes and Peter Gator are here and they would like to talk to you. Well, I had never met Daryl Hayes, although I knew about him, but I never met him, and I'd never met Peter Gator either. And I went over and he said to me, she introduced me. And he said to me, he goes, well, you have some very good references. And I'm like, well, of course, I plugged in Frank Sabella, Wendell Samet, and Bob and Jane Forsythe. Those were my references to come and, and apply for this
What?
great job, He goes, your references are quite impressive. He said, but he said, I have a reference even closer that gave you a glowing report. I said, oh, really? Who is that? He goes, my wife. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I didn't know that he was married to her even, I can't think of her name right off the top of
Maureen.
my Maureen. That's it.
Doreen. Yeah.
Doreen.
Yeah.
And she said, oh yeah, Doreen's known you forever. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like that's crazy. So anyway, and at that point I had to meet with him and John over at the building on show day and do a real interview. And I did. And that was that. And I kind of left out the part that as a kid, prior to Dogs, I was in the theater and I did theater work. Did you really? So I was trained actress and singer and dancer and all that stuff. And the last show I did was on Broadway. And
wow. I never got that far.
Yeah, I did two productions of South Pacific and two productions of The King and I, and then several commercials and modeling and all that stuff, the kids do when they're.
I didn't know that. Look at that.
Well, a lot of people didn't. Actually, Elliot Weiss sent in to the dog news one time. What child actress is now a dog handler? Blah, 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 blah. And I was like, and so when I saw it, I was like, oh, Elsie, come on, man. He goes, well, hardly anybody knows that. I'm like, yeah, well, they don't have to, But anyway, that came up in my interview. That's what made me say this, as that came up in my interview. And Daryl, he was a musician. Yep. And so and he said to me, he said, oh, that's really helpful because at least you've been in front of an audience. And I'm like, okay, yeah, all right. Yeah, I guess you're right. It's true. Yeah. I said, some people would look at it as a step down for me.
When I changed over from trying to be an actor to dog shows, my dad said, well, you're still acting.
Well, you know what? Isn't that the truth? Oh my gosh, that's so funny. That is so funny. Yeah. But yeah. So anyway, that's all she wrote, except for the fact that he calls me for finalizing that I was hired like less than a month later. It was probably a couple of weeks later to tell me I was hired for the job. And he says, but we had a little change in plan. I said, oh. And he said, you got to go to Missouri. I'm like, Missouri? And he said, yeah. And I'm like, where in Missouri? He said, well, you can go to St. Louis or Kansas City. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, the only thing I knew about St. Louis or Kansas City was to fly in for a dog show with a toy dog under the seat and show it and leave. That's the only thing I knew about the middle of the country, honestly, and occasional trip to Texas. So, but yeah, so my husband and I flew out here. He met me. I was actually being trained in Colorado. And he flew in from Florida. And the only thing we could figure out that we could do was because it was going to be temporary. Michael Save was going to plan to retire in 2011. I think it was that he had decided to retire. And so we decided we could stick it out, husband stay at our house in Florida, kids, grandkids at this point in our lives. I had a brand new grandchild, and my husband was like, okay. And he had his own business. He had a 26-man custom shop, woodworking shop, and worked for these designers and this and that. And so he had, everything was established there. So it was like, okay, well, I'm going to do it. So, and I did. I went to the Tar Heel for the last time and dispersed of the last of the dogs and met mom there and gave her back some of the pets that we shared, and
Yeah,
yeah, it was a big deal. And
I
it was
bet.
it was kind of
Gosh.
funny though, because I didn't even tell they swear you to secrecy when you get that position, and until they announce it. Well, that never really works out for them. So um anyway, I wouldn't even tell my mother, because she was just her whole world were dog people, so that's the only people she could call. So I'm like, yeah, no, I can't tell mom, I can't tell mom. So, and she really, she took it hard, she took it hard, but hey, whatever. And Mary was there. Mary was fresh out of the gate. She'd only been there a year, and Sue was in there, and it was just, we were all just getting hired in. And then Patty came along. Roz was in there. Yeah, we all just sort of came in within years of each other, and it was interesting to come out here. We searched for a place. My husband flew in from Tampa, and I flew in from Colorado, and we stayed out here. And they gave us like 10 days to stay out here and just check the place out. And we did, and we checked this, we checked that, and finally I found a nice little apartment that I thought was nice, gated community. My husband's like, I want you somewhere where you're going to be safe and happy, and access to the airport. But he's very much more logical about things than I am. And we found a place, getting ready to sign the lease. And he goes, okay, I can tell you're not totally comfortable. Let's go sleep on it. In the meantime, let's go scout out the area, just look at things. He said, he's very much into history. So I saw this little historical town. Let's go take a ride there. Okay, fine. 15 minutes north of the airport, we go like 7 miles out into what they call the bluffs in this part of the country. And it's like a very hilly, almost mountainous region that runs from, I think it's down in Arkansas, all the way up to the Dakotas. And it makes a great boundary for some of these states. And we go up into these bluffs and ride through, and I'm like, God, this looks like Connecticut out here. I said, I had no idea that they had this kind of terrain out here, these hills and these beautiful countrysides and big, it was just beautiful. And we come upon this little 1837 town, and we stop at the top of Main Street, and I'm like, I want to live here. This is a good place. It reminded me of the little town when
Sure.
I went to school in high school in Connecticut. And we walked down to the end of the street, which Main Street is 3 blocks long. So we walked the 3 blocks and stopped and had lunch at a little cafe and went in and out of places, got to the bottom, and I look up, there's a for rent sign in an apartment. And I'm like, huh. And the apartments all were above the stores on Main Street. So I went into the store below and I said, can you tell me about that? And this little Bichon comes running out from the back, and then we start talking dogs and and she's now a very good friend of mine still. And she said, go up. She said, the architect that's doing the work up there, he's also the contractor, and go on up and check it out. I went up in this beautiful loft apartment, and I was like, how much is it? And he's like, $500 a month. I'm like, really? Well, guess what? You have a new tenant. So Gina and her 2 little chihuahuas moved into the apartment above the store. And the woman that I became very good friends with that owned the store, I would groom her dogs. She would babysit my dogs. And we ended up with this great relationship. So here I am in this little town almost 20 years later, decided to stay here. And we went, once the recession hit in what year was that? 2008, 2010, something like that, down in Florida. Things were, my husband would call me every day and he'd be like, wow, things are getting tough down here. Well, next thing we know, Michael passes away from a heart attack. Daryl calls me. He says, Gina, you can go back to Florida now. Well, if you come out into a part of the country where you really don't know the people, and it takes a couple years to know the people. And, I hate to say it, but they kind of throw you to the wolves and say, okay, go out there and do the job. And it's like, okay. And the job encompasses so much, and there's just so much, and no less getting to know the people. And might I add, going through menopause at the same time. and doing all that. By the time they called and said, okay, go ahead and go back to Florida, I was like, I don't want to go back to Florida. I want to stay right where I am. I know the people. I like the people. This is really a comfortable spot for me. I called my husband. I said, okay, well, before I tell them anything, I said, I want to talk to you. And things were starting to look sad in that area for the recession. And he's like, all right, let me come out. He goes, obviously I have time on my hands. Let me come out, stay with you, and let's think about this. Okay. He came out, he stayed for 2 months, and he had a partner that took care of things in the shop. He stayed for 2 months. And at the end of the 2 months, he said, I get it. Okay. He goes, let's do it. I'm like, whoa, whoa, okay.
Sounds like a great guy.
Right. Oh, he's amazing. And I went back. Daryl was very kind to me. He would schedule me for some groups of shows always down there. That, whether, and especially around the holidays, he knew, that I wanted to be with my family. And so I went down there and we put the house on the market, and that was all she wrote. Eventually. So I'd been out here for about 6-7 years, and my kids would always come out and bring the grandkids. And it was because I missed out on them being, the second one had just been born when I left. I missed out on a lot of time with them. And so they would come out, whenever they could, vacation, or my husband would go and get them and bring the grandkids out and stuff. And my kids ended up, my son went through a divorce, and one moved out, the single one moved out, and he said, I think I want to move out here. I'm like, okay, great. So he came out, and a few years later, the other one went through a divorce, and he came. And then my grandson came, and I was like, oh, this is so awesome. And so here I am settled in this little town, and we belong to the Chamber of Commerce and the park board, and we're very involved in the town. My husband's on the board of trustees for the museum, and we're busier now than no, I'm not busier than when I was working. I shouldn't even say that because I'm not. I'm not constantly packing my clothes and, heading out the door. So yeah. So there,
My God,
here I
it worked
am.
out so well, though. That is amazing.
Got here 2006, July of 2006, and whatever year this is, I'm still here.
Oh,
And I'm close to PCA. So when they made the decision to move to St. Louis, it was like, oh, I can do that. Yeah, that's good. I'm going to miss the crabs a lot, but I think I can do that. So we make do. Yeah.
So when did you retire from the AKC? 2020?
And I think, it was 2020 when we all got laid off. It was April of 2020. And then I kept saying, because my husband had gone through a bone marrow transplant and his immune system was not good. And so we talked to his clinicians, and they said, avoid being out there as long as you can, because if you bring something home, that could be really dangerous for him. So and actually they were saying for both of you, but mostly for him, And so I kept saying to Patty, no, put me last. Make me the last one to go back to work, And so, of course, the year went by, and I think it was finally in November or something. She said, okay, they're going to stop. They're not going to hire the full staff back. They're going to stop at some point. I said, oh, let me talk to my husband. And so we talked, and he goes, just do it. So I told her, I said, I'm retired. Okay, you can hire back anybody you want. I said, I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop now. So that's when I stopped. Yeah. And I miss it. I miss it some. Obviously, people miss it because they still call me for information, and I keep. I mean, it's funny. Yeah, it's funny. And I say to them, I don't work there anymore, but and as long as it hasn't changed, this is what I remember. So there you go. And
Sounds like the same thing I do to Patty.
You're right. And then I didn't want to judge. I didn't want to judge, and then my peers there, other field reps, staff, send me, Patty, thank you very much, sends me a little pin with she goes, this is your going away, one of your going away presents. And it was the pin, my judging tag. And so I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. Yeah, I get it. So, and it took me a while. It took me probably 2 years before I took off my first assignment. So, and I don't.
Do you enjoy it though? Like, you obviously enjoyed PCA, but do you enjoy it?
Well, I enjoyed PCA because it's like being home, for me. But there's times when I enjoy it. There's times I don't love it. It's not something I would ever do full time, like some judges that go, every weekend. Yeah, I love being home. I love being with my family. I love, just being, like I said, we live in such a beautiful little town, and being involved with that. And I love that. It's something I do, and I love to plan a vacation when I want a vacation. And, now I could kick myself because I took a Memorial Day assignment and not thinking that it was Memorial Day and said yes. So I guess I'm going to have to do that. But I really am not driven. So I've never, and Tim's asked me too about, are you going to apply for more? And I'm like, yeah. No, I'm very comfortable in my little toy world. I love them. I love my poodles. I love my poodle specialties. And the one thing I think becomes disheartening for me is that with that background that I just went through, and learning from so many of the great ones, that when I see shifts in breeds and they start to shift to not really be that breed, but yet, and particularly in my breed of poodles, because there's a lot of smoke and mirrors happen there, and unfortunately, I don't know, it disappoints me. It disappoints me when I see that. And I think that's where I think some people kind of open their eyes when I judged this PCA, because it's a moderate breed. It's not, all this flash and dash. It's not. It's not what it is. And it's funny, I had posted something on the AKC confirmation judges one time about poodles are not the Doberman drag. They are not the stallion of a dog. Those fit other breeds. They do not fit a poodle. A poodle is a light, airy ballet dancer. I mean, they are moderate. They don't open their legs up big and wide like a shepherd. They don't. They lift and they go, and if they do that, they lower. So, and after teaching that judges education, which I ended up at, because I was with AKC, and Chicago always put on a bunch of judges education up there, and they Daryl said to me, I think it was the first year I was working too, and he said to me, he goes, "Okay, they don't have anybody available from PCA," and I wasn't a member of PCA at the time. They don't have anybody available at PCA to come and do this seminar for poodles, and they really want a poodle parrot, blah blah. You're going to have to do the. I'm like, really? Okay. And but that was my first introduction to doing judges education as the leader and not one of the people that just helped, with it or brought dogs and stuff. And man, I loved it. It was like being back on stage. Well, I was like, this is cool because now I can share all that stuff that I know, with other people and yet stay in the lane. And I'm kind of a rule keeper. I like to go by the rules. So the breed standard was the breed standard to me. And after dissecting it with great people like the Clarks and Frank and Mr. Biven and, just all these cool people that and breeders, I felt like I really knew that part of it. And so when you judge them, and this is part of it for me, so when you judge them and you get to a dog show and, you don't find that anymore, it's like, oh, what's happening? What's happening here? Or you talk to judges and in the role of the AKC rep that say, oh, I just saw blah, blah, blah. And oh, what a stallion of a dog in the presence and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay. And because of our positions, I was like, well, yes, I mean, that's a nice dog, but it's not my style of dog. And that's how I would have to put it, Oh, well, what do you mean? Well, okay. So I would say to them, if you really look up terminology on stallions, I said, you would find that more fits maybe a working dog, or that. And then I also go to that Doberman and drag thing. And it's like, those are dogs with bone and a different center of gravity. And, it's different. It's very different. I said, that's not a poodle. That's just not a poodle. I said, if you want to liken a poodle to something, liken it to maybe a Vizsla or a German short hair pointer or something like that. I mean, not to that caliber of dog, because they don't belong where we belong. So yeah. But yeah, they're running around the ring with their noses pointing up in the air. It's like, how do they see where they're going when their noses are pointing up in the air? Come on, let's get real here. Yeah. So anyway, that my first experiences with judges education, and then it became my thing. And I joined PCA, and Scott Wolf and Scott's an old breeder too, and I shouldn't say old, he's a veteran breeder, and he bred some beautiful dogs. And Scott Wolf and I kind of collaborated, and his wife Lisa, who's just this computer guru, and we've done that judges ed for a long time. And it was fun because at AKC, they said one year when we were having our meeting in New York, they said, okay, everybody's going to have to do their breed. I think somebody brought it up. Actually, I think it was me. And, we all have a breed, so let's learn about it from each other, so we would do presentations. And I got to do mine the year we were in New York. Actually, I got to do two of them. I volunteered to do two, one for Chihuahuas too. So it was kind of fun. It was really fun. Yeah.
You are fun.
Life is good. I can't argue about that. And here's a good thing. Our mutual friend, Eddie, he lives a couple hours up the street. And so, yeah, they were great to me when I first moved here, and, showed me around and taking me in. And it was great. Yeah, it was great. I would go and stay
I always
with
say,
them.
Eddie, Missouri loves company.
Yeah, right. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
And then recently, I think actually I brought Ron Menaker up here one year to this little town to have dinner in one of our restaurants, and because we have great food here too. And who else has been up here? Angela came with Eddie one year, and when they come up to judge the Kansas City or St. Joseph shows, I try and grab somebody up and bring them up into town and give them the tour, because a lot of people say, "Whatever kept you in Missouri?" I'm like, "Well, it probably wouldn't have stayed hadn't it not been for this little town." So.
Till you see. Wait till you see.
Wait till you see. Right, exactly.
Oh, amazing. I have one more question for you. And
Sure.
I don't know what your answer is going to be now that I think I always ask this question, but I'm going to ask anyway. If you
Okay.
met the 20-year-old Gina now, is there any advice you'd give her? But I don't know. Let's see let's see what she says.
Yeah, I would give myself advice. The advice I would give myself is to follow your heart more than follow what you think you should do. If your gut says to do something, but yet over here something saying, yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but, and it keeps you from doing it. Listen to your gut and your heart
Yeah,
when you make your decisions. And that's a hard lesson to learn. That's a really hard lesson to learn. And it's only been since those hurricanes destroyed my business that I have put myself into believing that that is how you should lead your life, and not so much be what you're forced to do, but what you're wanting to do. Because I think my life has been so different since that has happened. It has definitely flowed better for me. Again, it's not like there hasn't been tough times,
sure.
but my husband had been sick. I had my son had an accident. There was just things that you deal with in life. But in terms of where your head is at, I think it's important to just go with what your heart believes is the right thing to do, because otherwise you're not going to be comfortable. It's not even that you're going to be sad or you're going to be there, but you're not going to be comfortable with yourself. Okay, there you go.
You're amazing.
That's my little Zen thing. My nickname at AKC, because we gave each other nicknames always. This is actually a fun thing that I think Patty and Tim dreamt up, and it was like, okay, everybody gets to write in anonymously and vote, get names for each other, and then whatever got the most votes with. Well, mine was Kumbaya, because I don't know if you know anything about astrology, but I'm an Aquarius with an Aquarius moon. So everything for me is about keeping it people together. Having that attachment to everything. So that, because we're all just one, and we're all just basically walking each other home. And so, yeah, so they were always like, because I guess I was the one that you know always had that attitude about what I did and why I did it. And yeah, you got to be flexible in life. If you're not flexible, yes, hold on to your values, hold on to your morals, hold on to what you believe, which brings me back to the breed standard again. Yes, hold on to what you believe and what you know, and don't let that go, because once we let it go, we not only change our directions, but we also change the direction of what's around us. And in our case, dogs. if you let go those basic things about your breed and you want to change it, you're not. And I tell this to even newer judges. I used to tell this: if you're going to stand in the middle of the ring and judge my breed, don't decide that you're going to change the breed, because you're not. The breed is what it is, and do it by the book. And don't, leave that for breeders to do, if they want to change the breed, and the parent club. It's not your job to change it and make it something it isn't. So
That's good advice for us. It's good advice.
yeah, it is. I mean, it's good
It is.
advice for even me, because I don't, proclaim to be an expert in every breed. I don't proclaim to be an expert in any breed unless I've birthed some litters and watched them grow up and see every stage of their lives, and then get them in the ring and judge them, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But so I'm always asking questions about, so do they change? Does that change? And, because some breeds do and some breeds don't. I saw it in my own two breeds, with the Chihuahuas. They change tremendously from the time they're young to the time they mature. Whereas poodles, not so much, So it was always a real learning curve there.
I always enjoy talking to certain breeders that know their family so well. Like I have a woman I co-breed Irish setters with, and she can tell you at 8 weeks what they're going to look like at 6 months, what they're going to look like at 4, just because she knows her family.
Yeah,
Her
exactly.
family of dogs.
Exactly.
Incredible.
Yes, it is incredible. The Yeah, I think people were surprised, but I probably most surprised by what I did at PCA, because they didn't realize that I don't like that over the top thing. I mean, it's just not my
Right.
thing. I mean, I think that extremes in any breeds can eventually take you down a bad lane. You have to, and I do understand that it takes different kinds of styles within a breed type to be able to create the try and go for your perfection in your breed. But in the same note, somebody, I think it was Billy Miller, posted one time, would you breed a dog with disqualifications? And I kind of sat back and giggled to myself. Here's a good story. I giggled to myself and I thought, heck yeah, especially in my breed, I mean, would I breed a polka dotted one? I don't think so. But, I'd breed an oversized one if it had the qualities I needed. I would, definitely do that. And of course, the third disqualification being a haircut. So yeah, that doesn't make any difference. But that said, do you remember champion Hellzablazing's Fagan's Pride, who was shown by Richard Bauer? And he was a white toy poodle, and my mom bred him. And he was beautiful. He was a beautiful little dog, and he did a lot of winning. And there's a great picture of him going around the ring at Westminster, in the group ring at Westminster, and Richard on this big long lead. And I think back, the bitch that produced him was the last puppy of a bitch that was a key top producer in our line, because she was a C-section bitch. So she was the third section. Well, on that third breeding, Mom decided she was going to breed her black, because she did that every 3 generations with the whites to bring the pigment in, and she just found a black that most looked like what, the look she loved, and bred it black, her whites black. So our pedigrees were almost always white, and then boom, this black dog would come into it. Okay. So she was the last breeding. This bitch had 1 puppy, and she was mismarked. She had a little white chin on her. She had 4 toes on her 4 feet were white. She was adorable, and she was undershot. And I was like, and we did everything to keep it alive because who knew that the day she was born? So here she is with all these issues, should I say, disqualifications.
Sure.
And I was like, okay, so what are we gonna do with her? Now what? And she goes, we're keeping her. And I'm like,
Guess what?
we are? Yeah. And she goes, oh, yeah. She said, she is 3/4 white and 1/4 black with that pedigree. I'm going to breed her white again and she will have all whites. And she did. She never had anything but white puppies and became a top producer and was the mother of that Fagan's Pride and who was a top producing dog too. And Patty's brother Scott, actually, when he retired, Mrs. Pearson owned him, and when he retired, Mrs. Pearson gave him Fagan, and Fagan lived his life out with Scott. And Patty recently had sent me some things. Yeah. Anyway, it was all very emotional and
Oh,
sweet.
I'm sure. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah, so it's not like they should be thrown away. It's even in the situation where I had to measure dogs at PCA, and when I did, I thought, no, I'm going to showcase this dog first before I measure it, and I don't measure it to measure it out. I measure it just to clarify its size, and I thought there's somebody out there that can use these dogs, even if the owner doesn't want to, the person that bred it doesn't want to or can't. And we have such an international venue of people that have a different breed standard than we do,
Right.
that absolutely can use these dogs. So I felt it important to at least, go through the whole of moving them and having them shown to before you do anything like that. I think it's important, especially in that venue, where we have such an international climate. So, yeah. Anyway, that was me. It was what it was.
Gosh. I could talk all day to you.
I know, it's just fine. You can call me anytime. I'm retired now, and I'm supposed to be doing stuff, I'm sure, but I don't know. I do it on my time now. Everything's on my time. Yeah. So I
Oh,
like it.
I can't thank you enough. This has been amazing. Amazing. So we tried to get this. I bugged you. Not that we tried. I bugged you, and you
I
were always
know.
really busy. And
Well,
I'm
and
so glad
between the
we
two
got
of us and our belly problems, that
it.
kept us off our feet for a while and not
Yep.
really wanting to be on camera. No, yeah.
Oh, this has been totally amazing. I can't thank you enough. So much
Oh, well,
appreciate
thank
it.
you. I
Yep.
appreciate it too. I really do. I really
Oh,
do. And listen, you take care of yourself.
I will, and you too. You look fabulous. You looked fabulous on the video. I wish I could have been there, but it was fun to
Well,
watch.
thank
So
you. It's a lot of work
yeah,
to look
yeah.
fabulous anymore. It's a lot of work.
I don't know if I'll ever get to that point, but I'll. Oh,
And I did
okay.
have a really nice ending to my PCA with that I was chosen to do miniatures or best of breed, whichever one I choose to do in 27, I think it is. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Oh,
So I thought that was kind of cool.
that is
Yeah.
exciting. Oh, good
Yeah.
for you. Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very proud of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
And
Oh,
humbled, believe me. Yeah. Very humbled.
yeah. Well, again, thank you, Gina. I really appreciate it. It was great to see you.
You too. Take care, Will.
Like I said before, Gina, that was amazing. I could have spoken for hours. If you like what you're seeing here, make sure you press the like, share, and subscribe button, and join us each week for the Dog Show Drive, Canadian edition. And I'm still awestruck by Gina. Thank you again, Gina.